Right, on to our lead story. We know Prime Minister Modi has been touring the world asking companies and governments to invest in India, after which we heard that FDI norms were relaxed last month to clear the decks and to sort of invite international funds to come and invest in India. One of the most excited industries about that announcement was the real estate industry. Now, 1 month down, it does not look like investors have jumped on that bandwagon. My colleague Aishwarya Paliwal has the latest details. She's brought us this report on the mood among industry experts regarding these relaxations. Aishwarya.
The government had relaxed FDI norms in 15 sectors, including construction, last month. But industry experts are extremely divided on these easier norms. Experts tell us that the norms that have been relaxed will actually not boost economy, though they will definitely help in the ease of doing business. One of the major reasons for this is that a lot of foreign investment funds had invested in India during the peak years of 2005 and 6, and right now they are extremely cautious of putting their money in India. In fact, the flow of FDI in India has only decreased in the past few years. From 2013 to 14, this number stood close to 7,000 crore rupees. In 2014 to 15, this number was at close to 5,000 crore rupees. And in the past few months, we have only been able to garner close to 200 crore rupees in terms of FDI. Experts say that if the government really wants to reap all the benefits of these relaxations that they have done, they really need to put their policies in place.
All right, so obviously a lot more needs to be done in order to make this industry more attractive for FDI. Joining us on the show, Rajiv Bairati is the Executive Director of Capital Transactions at Knight Frank, and Anish Singhvi is partner at PwC. PwC did a study on what's happening with this industry right now. I'm also going to open up the phone lines if you have a question on how what the government needs to do and how you can make that home more accessible, because whatever the government does right now will have an impact on the home that you buy, on the prices and the accessibility of homes in India. I'm going to start with Anish. Anish, tell us this. Obviously, there was a lot of excitement about FDI. One part of it is to open up those floodgates and sort of make government policy more easier to deal with. The other part is making the industry itself attractive, and it seems like we haven't done that. If you were to make a list of the things that have not worked, what would those be?
So let me start with saying that whatever the government has done by opening up the FDI sector, it's a big boost, substantial changes which facilitate investment. Now, facilitating investment is one part of the activity. The other part is obviously getting things right with respect to how the investors would look at the Indian market, be it the ability for them to make profitable exits, or whether the transparency levels as well as the way the real estate developers function, are they changing substantially with respect to accountability, whether they have...
That's an interesting point. I want to start with just that one. One of the things that we all know about the real estate industry, that transparency has always been an issue. So if I'm an investor coming in from overseas, I'm going to want to study the books of this company, do due diligence, and the issue of black money in the industry has always been a problem. Has enough been done to sort of clean up the industry from black money? Obviously, 100% is going to be near impossible, but have we at least done 2% or 10%?
I think, actions have been taken. In principle, the government is very clear. They want to ensure that the real estate sector per se and in general, all the sectors put together are devoid of black money. It's easier said than done, because there is a lot of historic reasons, as well as in general, there has been a lot of real estate markets having black money in general. So it is going to be a tough task. It's going to take longer, but I think slowly but surely it will change.
I believe we have Raj Menda, corporate chairman of RMZ Corp, on the show with us right now. We're having trouble getting in touch with him because obviously it's raining quite heavily in Bangalore. So that puts our link at a bit of a risk. Raj, thank you for joining us. We're talking about transparency in the industry and the progress that's been made to that end to attract foreign investment. As a developer yourself, how would you rate transparency in the industry right now, and what steps are being taken by industry?
See, I think it's more to do with credibility. In terms of transparency, I think the systems and processes are well in place. You have good firms to assess valuations, good firms to assess how the books are written up. I think those parts are easy. The whole thing, and even the government helps in establishing value of each locality in the urban areas by putting out guideline values in most of the places. So as long as the investment is coming into urban India, into the larger cities, it's easier to assess what needs to be done and make a fair assessment of it. The challenge only comes in when you're going to do a rural development where the valuation is not certain, and there's a potential of cash money having been parked in those type of transactions where it's not very difficult to assess in those villages what is a fair and a fair value of the properties over there. But I think in urban India, especially if the developers have credibility, I can see this FDI being of a great boon to developers in this sector.
I want to bring in Rajiv Bharati here. Rajiv, is that true that if you look at just urban India, there doesn't seem to be too much of a problem there for credibility and with transparency? Is that your experience right now when you're brokering deals on the ground?
So let's look at what has happened over the last 10 years. And India has been able to attract almost about $25 billion over the last 10 years at the rate of almost about $2 to $2.5 billion. And industry has been infested with certain problems. You spoke about black money, somebody else spoke about transparency. Those are the issues, and let's not forget that it's a capital intensive industry and it's still at the nascency stage. It will take a lot of time to bring in transparency at par with some of the Western countries. So we have attracted capital, and there's no reason why we would not continue to attract foreign direct investment into the country and into real estate. But I think the industry is currently facing different problems. These are problems on the ground, certain operational problems. So what has happened over the last few years is that a lot of supply has been created, especially in the residential sector, which constitute almost about 65 to 70% of the industry. And because there is a huge supply and there isn't a lot of demand to match this supply, I'm not sure Indian market is attractive to foreign direct investors, given the risk perception that they have. And when a foreign direct investor is coming into the country, don't forget that he's comparing the country with a lot of other emerging markets that he has a choice to invest in. So I think if we really are interested as a government and as an industry to attract foreign direct investment, and we think that certain regulations can be the game changers, then I think a lot of other things also need to be done. For example, in the past, government has promised a lot of infrastructure development in the peripheral areas for which the master plans were opened up. But I don't think a lot of work has been done on the ground. And till the time, the trust deficit that has been created between the government and the consumers on one hand, and between the developers and the consumers on the other, is bridged by certain strong policy actions on the ground. I'm not sure we as a country can actually increase the pace of attracting the foreign direct investment.
I think Rajiv's hit the nail on the head here when he talks about the trust deficit between customer and builder right now. And this is something we're encountering on this channel on a daily basis. People who call us are, mistrusting to a point of being almost afraid of their developers. Anish, I'm going to come back to you here. Obviously, there's a lot that needs to be done. We can get to the other points of ease of doing business from the government's point of view, infrastructure to open up new supply, but fundamentally to tackle consumer interest and to bring the consumer back into the industry. How big a problem is that right now? And shouldn't industry be doing something? Because it's one thing to say this is what the government needs to do, but industry needs to sit up and take notice.
So I think developers have. It's not that the developers don't want to change. There are good guys as well as the bad guys. Generally the way the real estate market is looked at is if there are some bad guys, the entire the brush is painted in the same color as the bad guys.
Some? I mean, it's
yeah.
more than some.
Yeah, sure. But the developers are doing, whatever they can do to, and some of the developers have overall thought process of listing at some stage where, transparency, without having a transparent organization in terms of the financials, governance standards, all of them not being in place, it's impossible for them to actually go for a listing.
Okay, if that's the case, then why aren't more customers happy? Because if you keep the customer happy, you'll keep the investor happy. And obviously the problem that it all boils down to right now is that the Indian customer is just not happy. So what's being done to keep the Indian customer happy when it comes to real estate?
Maybe sometimes the customers are the ones which are aggrieved, and therefore they are the only ones who will complain. It's unlikely that a happy customer will complain, right?
Okay.
So you may be getting calls largely because there are aggrieved customers who want to vent out their frustration somewhere. But yes, there have been situations where customers may be unhappy with certain set of developers. In general, what has happened is developers, because of the kind of investments they are making, plus the way the progress with approvals, etc., take place, some or the other reason the projects get delayed, and therefore there will be some level of frustration with the customers eventually.
All right, I want to bring Raj in here. Raj, overseas, we know that investors who are aggrieved can, then file class action suits. There's a very different legal structure available to investors overseas, which are not technically available in India. Is that why foreign direct investment is shying away from this country, or do you see another reason there?
No, I think I don't agree with you on that point. I think out here the arbitration laws are well put in place. So, I don't foresee any problem because all the investors we've talked to, don't shy away at least on that count. See, credibility is a big thing. A track record, putting out quality, having customer satisfaction are big important aspects when it comes to big funds wanting to put money with developers, because credibility is everything in this business going forward from the customer's point of view and from the investor's standpoint of view. So but I personally feel the rules are in place. I have not seen any investors shying away just because the rules aren't adequate to support them for the investment made in India.
The numbers don't actually support that. If we look at the numbers right now, and I'm going to pull them up on your screen. This is Cushman Wakefield that put out a report that said over the last 1 year, 30%, 31% of the PE funding that came into the real estate industry is FDI. The rest of it is all domestic PE. Is there a reason why the split looks like that? And now that the rules are changed, what level do you expect that to go up to? If it's now 70-30, do you expect that number to change in the future, Raj?
Yes, I look at, now with this opening of this new FDI rules, I'm actually quite excited to see that even, small investments can come through, whereas a group of people NRS getting together who also want to invest back home in India, can come through this new FDI route. So I think a lot of avenues have opened out now, and I'm quite excited to see the next decade is going to be a huge, and the government has been very positive in opening out the FDI virtually to everything, and except for trading in land, which is good. Because that's not what someone is supposed to be doing in this country. It's to add value, to create development, to create jobs is what the money should come in for, which is right now the government has opened out recently in this press note 12 all the aspects to bring the money into this country for actual development, which I'm very happy about. So I can actually see that number going to about 70% or 80% of the FDI money will come from the FDI money, because they actually have huge pools of capital which can be made available for India to grow from strength to strength.
Anish, come in. I know that PwC doesn't agree with that view entirely at this point, that it will go up to 70-30 in the favor of FDI. Do you see that happening?
In fact, I'm not sure whether the numbers that we have includes commercial real estate, because that forms also a substantial portion of FDI investment. And if I look at the recent deals that have happened, they are sizable deals. All foreign investors, big houses, Blackstone's, Brookfield, GIC, all of them have been investing substantially in commercial real estate. So maybe if I add all of this together, the FDI portion may already be almost 40% or 45%. And with the opening of the gates for FDI in residential real estate, or even completed projects to an extent which were not allowed in the earlier regime, will just help to increase the share of FDI in real estate.
Okay. I want to bring in, Rajiv here. Rajiv, how much of a difference will the regulator make to this industry at this point for investors looking at it both from overseas and in India when they look at the fact that we are expecting a regulator fairly soon? Is that a good thing, or they're expecting that will just create another window, possibly cause another hurdle, create confusion for the next year or two?
I think the industry is extremely excited about the regulator, and our interviews, at least with all the foreign institutional investors, is pointing to the fact that that they are all looking forward to the regulator, because what a regulator is going to do is that it's going to bridge that I spoke about, the deficit of trust. So it's going to bridge that deficit, and it's going to create a robust protection mechanism for the customers. And one can always make changes in the regulations at a later stage, but a strong framework is required to start with. And I think once this is done, it should help boost the foreign direct investors, because it should help bring in the confidence of the customers, which would bring in the demand. And that's how you would perhaps, that would be one way of kickstarting the industry again.
Also, since we talked about the NRI season, and we know that December, January tends to be what we call NRI season in the investment world, are you expecting a lot of those NRIs to also open up their checkbooks when they're visiting the country? Rajiv?
NRIs, yeah. So, I believe that NRIs have been investing into real estate in various shapes and forms, if not directly through their relatives, etc. And the fact is that a lot of NRI investors are stuck because they had expected certain delivery time frame, certain infrastructure development from the government, which has not happened. And that's why I was talking about the whole operational bottlenecks and implementation bottlenecks on the ground. And at some point in time, it's all good to have investors buying the real estate from the developer. Those could be primary sales. But eventually you need to have customer whom investor could sell the product. And that's how the new investors come in, and that's how the market keeps getting made. So unless we have the end user demand, I find it extremely difficult to believe that we could attract fresh wave of foreign capital, whether in the form of institutional or NRI.
Raj, do you want to respond to that? Unless and until the Indian consumer who's buying homes is happy enough to come back to this market, we're going to have trouble attracting FDI.
See, I slightly differ on that. I think it's right now the sentiment is a little dull with the customer himself, because he sees the overall economy not doing as good as it was promised. But I do see better days, and I can assure you cities like Bangalore, where big jobs are being created, in cities like Bangalore, Gurgaon and so on, will catch up very rapidly. In fact, if things start looking better, and the stock which is built up right now and in the pipeline will get completely absorbed in the next 1.5 to 2 years, and there will be a shortage once again. So I'm a believer that it's just a matter of time. It's a momentum play. It'll be all back on track, and everything will be over and done with. And of course, I can't assure you for small towns where an oversupply has happened, but at least in these big cities where big jobs are being created, I can see the whole stock getting absorbed very, very rapidly.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a phone number up on the screen right now and invite phone calls from our viewers at this point. We want to know how you feel about this industry. Are you optimistic? Are you ready to buy a home? Do you want to wait and watch? Are you waiting and watching for prices to come down? We want to know how the consumer feels about this industry. So if you're in any of the cities right now, call us and get on this conversation and tell us how you feel, or you can tweet it out, #FDI in Realty. Anish, from your studies at this point, and I want to rebut what Raj just told us. He said none of the big cities are having problems. I don't think that's true. We know that the NCR market is particularly plagued with oversupply. The luxury market in Mumbai is having a huge problem of oversupply as well. There are pockets in smaller markets in Pune, in Bangalore, where we're starting to see some overhang as well. So it's not fair to say that, to paint the markets all together and say all urban markets are going to do fine, is it?
Sure. I think, current situation may be the situation because of the backlog of reforms that have not happened, and because of which, the expected recovery of the economy is taken longer, which is why consumers don't have enough money to spend for taking an investment decision with respect to either residential or commercial properties to be bought. And you rightly said the luxury market in Mumbai or, Noida or Gurgaon, the residential market has not picked up. Whereas in Bangalore, because of the job scenario, or the IT companies recovering to an extent, has led to a further buyout of properties. In comparison, I think over a period of time, if with the reforms being in an overdrive mode, last few months we've seen the government acting substantially in a hurry to get reforms out. With that, if the economy were to improve, I would agree with Raj that eventually things will change.
Sure. I want to understand from all of our guests right now what this FDI impact will have on prices. For our viewers who are watching at home right now, and we know there are plenty of people who want to buy homes because we need homes in India, who are possibly waiting right now for some sort of change in prices. Rajiv, I'll come to you first. If we're talking about residential property right now, we're talking about homes, and this FDI that's expected to come in, what sort of an impact will it have on prices across the board?
Well, quite logical. The role of FDI is to help developers create quality stock, more stock, and also don't forget that a lot of foreign direct investors who are also sometimes developers bring in best practices and policies which should make Indian developers more efficient. So I think the net impact of a larger foreign direct investment should be creation of more efficiency, better quality stock, and therefore reduction in prices.
All right, so FDI will lead to reduction in prices. Raj, I know that you focus on commercial property, but when you're looking at the market right now, is it true that foreign investors have a far lower ask in terms of IRR than domestic investors, and do you expect a flood of foreign investors will actually bring prices down?
No, I don't agree the prices will come down because it's the cost of capital is no doubt cheaper when it comes from the FDI, in the sense they're happy with lower expectations because their cost of sourcing that capital is much lower for them. So having said that, but it does not bring the cost of the production cost down, because I find the material costs have gone up. Cement, as you read in even today's paper, they've increased the price by 70 rupees a bag very arbitrarily. So all these are going to obviously impact it on the cost, and thereafter is going to be passed on to the customer. Right now the developer is holding back and just absorbing the punch. But if the things start turning around, all this will get passed down, and again the prices will start going up. So inherently the costs have gone up, and I do not see any space for the prices to come down. So I only see that more will create more better quality products, because the standards will be higher. There's be more credibility in the system, and developers will reach out to these funds, and as long as they can prove their track record. So I'm a believer that there'll be more growth, there'll be more opportunities, there'll be more suburbs being developed, but I don't think the price will come down.
Raj, very quickly tell us this. We also know that a lot of the commodity prices in the market came down drastically today. There were lower prices on steel. There's far lower prices on crude as well. We've had some analysts tell us it will have an impact on the input costs for developers. So developers who have to buy all of these things in order to build buildings will actually see those costs come down. Do you expect that none of that will be passed on to customers?
No, for sure, it's expected to be passed on to customer, but I know the word coming down, I think, there's an increase of about, an annual increase of about 7 to 10% on material costs that is happening year on year in the past. Now, I do hope that gets reversed or at least neutralized to no increase. But if the increase continues to happen even at 3-4%, then that impact of 3-4% gets passed down effectively in the increase in price down to the customer. So, I do always see that the developers are compelled to pass on the price increase to the customer. And if the price reduction is happening, then, obviously they'll do it in a highly competitive market environment. But at least I have never seen or don't expect the price to really come down. It'll just remain flat, or it'll go up marginally.
As a home buyer myself, and given all of the audience members that we're talking to, I'm not really sure if, better quality product is something that will drive the customer back to the market at this point. People are really looking for more affordability or lower prices. Anish, I want to come to you here. What impact will we have from a customer point of view on FDI? Because we know what the government needs to do or what industry needs to do at this point. But as an end user, what benefit will I have from FDI coming into the country?
I think as a customer, I won't see any difference between whether the project is invested through an FDI money or through domestic money. Essentially, the difference would be if there is a better quality project, because of the FDI investor participating in the business, of course, as a customer, I will benefit. The only differentiation that can happen is because of the fact that FDI money will have lower return expectation. Potentially, there will be some benefit of price reduction, but that should be very marginal, if at all. I don't expect substantial reduction in pricing just because FDI is now permitted.
All right. I am going to ask our guests also to give us this. Give us a checklist of things that you think need to be done right away in order to bring this FDI in. I'll start with Raj. Raj, if you were to put down a list of things that have to be done right away in order to make this market more attractive to FDI, because it will bring down the cost of funding and then it will bring down perhaps or bring more quality, like you said, into our market, what would that be? What's your checklist?
So, I look at like this in terms of RBI obviously needs to align with this new press note 12, which has just been released, because, the banks have to understand real estate in the same context as it's understood in press note 12. Of course, that I presume will happen very soon. But having said that, I think on a larger basis, like if you take, commercial real estate, I don't see why commercial real estate, which provides jobs, provides employment, and is basically an infrastructure backbone for IT companies, does not get an infrastructure status. So, that is number two. If infrastructure status is given to commercial real estate, which is a business my company is in, it makes it easier for the cost of capital to come down and the cost of production to come down. And lastly is, in terms of where in REIT, we are still looking at, the MAT and, the basic cost to come down, so that there's maximum throughput happening between the income earned on the rental side and the dividend distribution tax, which is also right now a hurdle in the hands of the customers. So all this, if this gets aligned, I'm sure, it'll get a lot more efficient. And FDI, I'm just waiting for these corrections to happen.
In fact,
this is on the commercial side.
We had a conversation on this channel with Leo Puri, who said that REITs is at least a year away because, just like Raj pointed out, there are so many things that need to be ironed out with REITs. Anish, tell us, according to PwC, what is the checklist right now? We know that the government needs to focus on infrastructure and ease of business. These are things that we're bringing up on this channel on a daily basis. What else needs to be done?
So, from the government's perspective, I think, I'll just pick up the point from what Raj talked about, REITs in general. If they are able to solve the REIT issue of dividend distribution tax, or, overall, there's some bit of MAT issue which is still left to be cured. But if they get that sorted, I'm sure there will be a lot of people who would want to list their assets, and, there may be a stop of, externalization or a capital market being externalized, because that was the other structure that was available with respect to each of these investors who would list typically in Singapore and buy Indian commercial real estate assets. Now, what may happen is, if the REITs get successful, there will be a lot of money which the developers will then have to be able to reinvest into different kinds of projects, which will A, reduce the overall debt situation in some of these projects, and B, it will ensure that there are newer projects and smart cities can be developed, etc. All of that, to an extent, is stuck also because of the fact that REITs are not in today.
Right. I also want to very quickly ask Rajiv before we wrap up this conversation. Rajiv, tell me, what is your checklist of things that need to be done? And I want a checklist for industry as well. We're not letting industry off the hook. So obviously, you talked about infrastructure some time ago, but for industry, what needs to be done?
So first of all, I agree completely with what Raj and Anish said, and I would just like to add upon what Anish said. And my request to the industry would be that the developers should focus upon project completion. I mean, they have promised a lot to the customers in the past, and time has now come to deliver on those promises. They had promised quality, they had promised delivery on time, and I think they should currently focus on completing the projects and focus on timely delivery to the customers. If they could do this single act, I think it will just open up further demand, and it should help boost foreign direct investment in the medium to longer run.
All right, so the checklist is fairly clear from what all of our guests want. We want the government to take a closer look at ease of doing business and infrastructure. Industry needs to make the Indian consumer happy by providing quality on time, and actually delivering. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the show and talking to us about FDI in real estate. That's something we're tracking very closely, especially REITs, opportunities for investors across the world, especially NRIs, to invest in India. We'll give you updates on that on this show.